Friends, Namaskar, good afternoon, and welcome to this special briefing from Bangkok on Prime Minister's visit to Thailand. As you are aware, Prime Minister arrived here yesterday to attend the ASEAN-related summits. Today he had 3 meetings, 3 engagements, India-ASEAN Summit plus 2 bilateral meetings. I have with me Secretary East, who was joined by our ambassador to Thailand, Srimati Suchitra Durai, as well as Joint Secretary Indo-Pacific Vikram Doraiswamy. Secretary East will give her initial remarks. After that, we will take some questions. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. As you all know, Prime Minister arrived in Bangkok yesterday afternoon. His first engagement was an interaction with the Indian community. Almost 5,000 members of the Indian community were present at the National Indoor Stadium in Bangkok, and they had very enthusiastically welcomed Prime Minister to Bangkok. The event, amongst those who attended, apart from the members of our diaspora and the NRI community, they were also members of the India-Thai Parliamentary Friendship Group. At the event, Prime Minister had released a commemorative coin on the occasion of the 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, and he had also released the Thai version of Thirukkurul, which is the great Tamil classic. This morning, Prime Minister participated in a business event which also marked the golden jubilee of the Aditya Birla Group's presence and businesses in Thailand. This year, they started their operations in 1969 and they complete 50 years. This is one of the first investments by an Indian company into Thailand, and Aditya Birla so far has made investments in a number of sectors, which include fabrics, chemicals, carbon, etc. And during the event, Prime Minister assembled those who, the business persons who were there. He, of course, recognized that through the Indian business houses and Indian investments, they make a lot of contribution to the economy of the country in which they operate, and also in terms of strengthening the economic ties between the two countries. Prime Minister outlined the progress that had been made in India over the past 5 years in achieving socio-economic milestones, which included financial inclusion, sanitation, access to electricity, as well as LPG, and the improved use of renewable energy. He also called on the businesses to further invest in India because of the growing opportunities that they are in India, and he called for further strengthening of the economic relations between the two countries. Later in the morning, Prime Minister also co-chaired the 16th ASEAN-India Summit along with the Prime Minister of Thailand. Thailand is the current chair of the ASEAN and also the country coordinator for India in the ASEAN. In his remarks, Prime Minister had underlined the centrality of ASEAN in India's Act East policy and the Indo-Pacific vision. He highlighted the convergence of our respective approaches to the Indo-Pacific. Both India and ASEAN shared a lot of similarity in the way they approach the Indo-Pacific. He also called for intensification of partnership in capacity building, which included areas like agriculture, science, IT, engineering, and the network of universities. Prime Minister called for greater surface, maritime, digital, and people-to-people contacts and connectivity. He referred to the $1 billion line of credit, which could be used for further strengthening connectivity in both physical and digital between India and ASEAN countries. Prime Minister announced that we would be looking at creating an endowment of about 50 million Indian rupees, and that would be used for promoting exchanges between faculty as well as students under the India-ASEAN University Network. In addition, about 50 scholarships were offered in agriculture universities. Apart from that, the other announcement was to hold a startup festival along with the India-ASEAN Hackathon early on in 2020. There was also reference to the sub-regional cooperation that India has in this region, and this includes the Mekong-Ganga cooperation and also India's recent joining as a development partner of the ACMEX initiative, which is the Ayovadu Chakrayo Mekong Economic Cooperation Strategy. So we were amongst the first development partners of ACMEX. On their part, the ASEAN leaders spoke of India as a long-term friend, a dynamic partner, and they acknowledged India's contribution in the region for peace and stability. The leaders also welcomed India's support to the centrality of ASEAN and India's programs and projects which support ASEAN integration and the ASEAN Master Plan for connectivity. They also acknowledged India's leading role in capacity building, including in agriculture. They expressed keen interest in enhancing partnership in maritime, cyber domains. And in terms of the 1,000 PhD scholarships that were launched, they expressed deep appreciation for India's cooperation and offering of this the scholarship as part of the knowledge building partnership between the two countries. And as you are aware that ASEAN had announced its ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific, and the ASEAN leaders noted the many commonalities they have with our Indo-Pacific vision, in particular SAGAR, which is security and growth for all. Apart from that, on the agenda was also the developments in the region and in the international areas of common interest and concern. These included terrorism, counterterrorism, violent extremism, cybersecurity, South China Sea, and it was noted by both sides the importance of promoting a rule-based order in the region, including through upholding adherence to international law, especially the UNCLOS of 1982. The leaders affirmed the importance of maintaining and promoting peace, stability, safety, and security in the South China Sea, in particular freedom of navigation and overflight. Subsequently, after the conclusion of the meeting of India-ASEAN Summit meeting, Prime Minister had two bilateral meetings. One was with the Prime Minister of Thailand, and the second was with the President of Indonesia. Today, later in the afternoon, he would be meeting the State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, and therefore today there would be total three bilateral meetings, and it would be noted that all the three are maritime neighbors of India. Of course, Myanmar is both the maritime neighbor and our closest land neighbor as well. All this emphasizes the key role and importance that India attaches to the ASEAN countries as a part of its Act East policy. On the bilateral meetings, the ones which have already taken place, press releases have been issued and they are already on the MEA website. But in short, as far as the meeting with the Prime Minister of Thailand was concerned, the discussions focused on connectivity, bilateral connectivity, apart from the broader concept of connectivity which was discussed with the ASEAN countries as well. And they also discussed a promotion of bilateral defense ties and including promoting trade and investment. In Thailand, it was noted that Thailand has started a direct flight from Bangkok to Guwahati, and that is in fact very important because it marks the connectivity with northeast region of India, which is actually our closest to the Southeast Asia region. In fact, if you look at it, Thailand has its Act West policy, India has its Act East policy, so it really makes us natural partners. As far as the meeting with Indonesia was concerned, it was agreed to work together on further strengthening the ties. The two leaders had already met previously at Osaka, And subsequent to that meeting, there had also been a meeting at the foreign ministers level. So it was to review the relationship, and there was a commitment to work together in promoting ties in all its sphere: defense, security, connectivity, trade and investment, people-to-people exchanges. So all in all, there was also emphasis again on maritime connectivity and cooperation in that area. Considering, and Prime Minister congratulated the President of Indonesia for the leadership role taken by Indonesia in the Indo-Pacific discussions that had taken place in the ASEAN. So that is the two bilateral meetings in the morning. Today, after the bilateral meeting with the State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, Prime Minister would be attending a gala dinner which is being hosted by the Prime Minister of Thailand for all the leaders attending the summit. So I'll stop here and take questions.
Ma'am, thank you very much. We have time for a few questions. Manish?
Manish Chand, India Rice Network. You said that the discussion saw a kind of a convergence between India and ASEAN on the vision of the Indo-Pacific. Does it mean there is a complete convergence, or are there areas where we have issues? That's number one. And number two, this convergence, how does this translate into enhanced cooperation in areas of connectivity or in any other area in the Indo-Pacific? Thank you.
Thank you, Manish. Would like to take this one.
When ASEAN came out with its outlook, we were amongst the first countries to welcome it. The reason why we were amongst the first, because it had elements in terms of maritime cooperation, maritime safety, sustainable use of marine resources. All these were issues on which our vision is also there. And we've looked at those areas, and they could be possible areas of working together with the ASEAN.
Thank you, Manas.
Ma'am, what are the main takeaways from the India-ASEAN summit meeting? And you said, in fact, the issues of terrorism, and then violent extremism, situation in the South China Sea were discussed in the meeting. In fact, did Prime Minister raise any of these issues during the meeting? Thanks.
Yes, Prime Ministers, they were discussed and they were raised by both sides. The Prime Minister spoke about terrorism and the threat that it poses to international peace and security, and similarly the ASEAN leaders also spoke about the importance of working together to defeat terrorism. So both sides referred to the issue of terrorism. South China Sea also, there was discussion. Prime Minister spoke on South China Sea, and so did the ASEAN leaders collectively, and many of them individually referred to South China Sea. And as you said, what were the other issue? The other issue, the takeaways, one of the main takeaways was to work together in Indo-Pacific, a question that was referred earlier. And the reason, of course, the convergence, I mentioned the other issues, because the principles on which we are approaching the Indo-Pacific region are similar to each other, and it is the way of now working together in the maritime domain in its very broad terminology.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi. So I am from NHK. So this morning, when the Prime Minister was referring in the ASEAN-Indian Summit, when he was talking about increase in partnership and the need to strengthen connectivity, does this necessarily extend towards RCEP, seeing as India still has several outstanding issues within it?
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
This is Kiran from Nikkei Asian Review. My question is, did this issue of RCEP figure in the bilaterals with Indonesia and Thailand?
See, let's take all the RCEP questions tomorrow. Wait till tomorrow for RCEP. But in terms of working with the ASEAN countries on trade, there was discussion on looking at the India-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement and to undertake a review of that.
Thank you.
Ma'am, you spoke about that financial, sanitation, renewable energy were discussed. Can you elaborate about in details to what kind of things were the business meeting?
I referred to these areas. Of course, that that Prime Minister had spoken about the focus of the Government of India on these areas, and as a part of the economic growth and development taking place in India at the business meet in the morning. But within the ASEAN, of course, there is those issues did not specifically come up.
Please.
I'm from Asahi, a Japanese newspaper. Is it planned to be held of Japanese Prime Ministers and Prime Minister Modi's meeting tomorrow? And what will be the issues?
I can only confirm that a meeting will take place, but what the issues will be discussed, we will brief you after the meeting has taken place.
Is it tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow. Correct. And coming back to the question that you raised about issues relating to the work that we are undertaking, tomorrow Prime Minister will be participating in a luncheon meeting which is hosted by the Prime Minister of Thailand. The focus of there is sustainable development. So many of those points will be discussed under the sustainability rubric.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Ma'am, some of the ASEAN countries actually were not very comfortable India joining the quadrilateral coalition. It was articulated by Singaporean foreign minister last year. So, ma'am, did this issue figure in the ASEAN summit meeting with India? And, ma'am, overall, ma'am, what were the, in fact, indications from the ASEAN countries about India's growing kind of role in the Indo-Pacific as sought by various powers, including US, Australia, and Japan?
See, as far as India's role in the region is concerned, as I mentioned in the very outset, all the ASEAN countries appreciated India's growing role, and that India's growing role is a factor of peace and stability in the region. So that is the broad approach of the ASEAN and the way they look at India. As far as the other issues which you spoke about, those were not a part of the agenda of the ASEAN meeting.
Last question, Manish. Yeah.
Madam, this $1 billion connectivity fund has been around for a long time. What is the progress in utilization of that fund?
As far as that $1 billion is concerned, there is one project. We have been approached by Lao government to look at funding of road in Laos under the $1 billion. Yes. Because this is a fund meant for connectivity projects. So it's either physical connectivity, digital connectivity. So we are looking at the first request which has been submitted.